hello and welcome back to the Lamppost Listener. My name is Daniel.
I'm Phil.
And this is a podcast where we chronicle transcendent truth by traveling further up and further into the classic works of children's literature.
This is Season 10, Episode 15, The Arrow, which covers Chapter 14 of The Hobbit.
Fire and Water, that's the name of our chapter today. Really excited for this one so far, and I can't remember, I don't think there's any other chapters like this. There are no hobbits in this entire chapter.
No hobbits were harmed in the creation of this chapter.
Or the destruction of the dragon, any of those things. Yes, in fact, it's Bard and the Master, I believe, might be the only two named characters that even speak. And Smaug. No, he doesn't speak. Doesn't talk.
Just roars and destroys.
Just roars and then dies. And dies early on in this chapter. I mean, that's just going to be something for us that's excited to talk about is a good portion of this chapter is not about the death of Smaug. In fact, he dies about halfway through it. So
it's a really interesting choice. You'd think that would be kind of a climactic thing, but not in this narrative structure.
And yet, maybe if you and I were still novices like we once were many moons ago when we first began this podcast, we might think that was done without thought. But we know our authors, we know MacDonald and Tolkien and Lewis enough, as we spent time on this podcast, to know that there's probably a really good reason that J.R.R. Tolkien has decided to have Smaug die halfway through this chapter and then spend a good portion of the chapter looking at what's left in the literal wreckage of Esgaroth Lake Town.
And what this destruction of this enemy sets up to happen.
Yeah.
Which is quite a bit.
There's a lot here. I think this is going to be a really great conversation. So, Phil, why don't I turn it over to you? It is an even chapter. You can give us the summary, and then we can really and truly dive right into this battle.
The men of Esgaroth notice a flicker of lights in the distance, and at first are thrilled, thinking that the king beneath the mountain has returned. When they realize that it is in fact the dragon, they sound the warning trumpets and prepare for attack, filling water vessels, loading weapons, and destroying the bridge to land. The town is mercilessly attacked, and hope begins to disappear. Bard, the captain of the archers, receives advice from an old thrush, and following it, aims for the hollow in the beast armor, and delivers a deadly shot. In the aftermath, Bard is praised, and the master of the town deflects attention to his inadequacy by reminding everyone who aroused the dragon from his slumber. As news of Smaug's death spreads, many march toward the mountain in search of treasure.
And that is Fire and Water. Let's actually, before we dive into any of the actual words in this chapter, let's talk about this title here. So let's take a step back for our listeners, for you and I as well, and think about some of the chapter titles that Tolkien has given us here. Okay, we've got things like An Unexpected Party, A Short Rest, Riddles in the Dark. We have Out of the Frying Pan into the Fire, Flies and Spiders, Barrels Out of Bond, A Warm Welcome. The literal last chapter was called Not at Home. So very interestingly, many of these chapters are directly related to the action of that chapter. An Unexpected Party, guess what that's about? An unexpected party. What are Flies and Spiders about? That's about a chapter with lots of flies and spiders, right? And yet here we have Fire and Water. What do you... I have some thoughts too, and even more importantly than me, Corey Olsen has some thoughts as well, the Tolkien professor himself. Tell me though, what do you make of this chapter title?
It's surprisingly simple, but it also has quite a bit to it. Fire and water are opposites in a lot of ways. One extinguishes the other. The two combined can have some effects. So there could potentially be a lot there, but it also, compared to all the other titles, it feels out of place.
It does feel a little bit out of place. And, as I was, throughout this season, I've been reading through, exploring J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit, which Corey Olsen wrote. Phenomenal book. In fact, we sent it to some of our listeners over on Patreon. Some of our top tier listeners were able to receive a copy of this book, and they've been able to read along with us as we've been going through it. And the first subtitle for Olsen's chapter on this chapter, this is kind of confusing. I'm talking about a book that's talking about another book, but the first subtitle for chapter 14 is Smaug's hydrophobia. And Olson does a great job of pointing out that this chapter is even arguably less of a battle between Smaug and Lake Town as it is between literally fire and water. Right? Smaug, the fire-breathing dragon, and then the literal town built on a lake go at it. And as we get a little bit more into this chapter, there's a couple of places where that very ancient elemental battle really comes into play here that I think makes it a little bit, and I guess the reason I want to harp on the title itself is because Tolkien, as meticulous as he is, you could easily see a world where he is having some of that ancient elemental battle occur, but doesn't give it the chapter title. And I feel like giving it the chapter title is really saying, hey, take a look at what's going on right here. This is really important, right? But maybe we should start, as we often do here, with these first few paragraphs in this chapter. And just like you mentioned, Phil, in your summary, it begins with what's a bit of an eye roll, maybe a chuckle for us as readers, when it comes to the observations of the people of Lake Town, who say things like, last night the watchmen saw them start, meaning the lights, and fade from midnight until dawn. Something's happening over there. Here are some of the things we hear. Maybe it's the king under the mountain forging gold. Maybe it is the actual dragon. Okay, that one makes a little more sense.
And then a little snide comment, the only king under the mountain we have ever known.
I want to come back to that because that is really great stuff, because that's actually going to be from Bard himself, right? And then there is maybe it is all of the gold being shipped down to us via the running river into the long lake. And what's so interesting is, okay, let's take away Bard's comment a second about like, no, I think it's a dragon. The people of Lake Town are, they might be kind of simple folk. We saw that a little bit back in chapter 10, but there is a reckless hope and optimism here. And yet Bard, the man with a grim voice, who everyone's saying, you always talk about floods and poisoned fish and never think of anything cheerful. He's the one saying, like you just said, Phil, there's only one king under the mountain that we have ever known. So we start this chapter off in the distance. Here's all these lights, and it's Bard really is our only person who says this. Hey, I think it might be something more important. And just like you then said, what happens relatively quickly here?
Well, they are attacked.
They're attacked.
Bard
right?
is the only one who has the sense to say, cut the bridges, and then to arms. Get ready, be prepared.
Yeah, cut the bridges to arms. And actually, right after he says to arms, why don't I read 2 paragraphs that come right after that, because it really heightens the atmosphere here. Then warning trumpets were suddenly sounded, and they echoed along the rocky shores. The cheering stopped, and the joy was turned to dread. So it was that the dragon did not find them quite unprepared. Before long, so great was his speed, they could see him as a spark of fire rushing towards them and growing ever huger and more bright, and not the most foolish doubted that the prophecies had gone rather wrong. Still they had a little time. Every vessel in the town was filled with water, every warrior was armed, every arrow and dart was ready, and the bridge to the land was thrown down and destroyed before the roar of Smaug's terrible approach grew loud, and the lake rippled red as fire beneath the awful beating of his wings. Oh, how about if I read one more paragraph, because this is great.
Sure.
Amid shrieks and wailing and the shouts of men, he came over them, swept towards the bridges, and was foiled. The bridge was gone, and his enemies were on an island in deep water, too deep and dark and cool for his liking. If he plunged into it, a vapor and a steam would arise enough to cover all the land with a mist for days. But the lake was mightier than he. It would quench him before he could pass through.
I'm fascinated by this. So we just saw the film adaptation from 2013.
Yeah, early 2010s.
Yeah. That dragon seems unstoppable. And very, very powerful. But this is saying that the body of water is enough to extinguish all that.
Oh,
And
absolutely, yeah.
the piece that I am asking about specifically is this dragon can fly from pretty far away where they can see this little glimmer, and then they see him coming. They have long enough to get ready. And when he arrives, they've cut some bridge. Was he going to walk across the bridge?
Okay, no, I
after
thought
flying?
about this because I think the first time I read this is the beauty of reading the chapter multiple times. Because the first time I read this, I'm like, well, he can fly. Like, why is Bard saying, everybody, the flying dragon is coming. Let's make sure we cut the bridge. Okay, here's my thought process around it. One, I am not picturing Benedict Cumberbatch, Smaug, right? I'm picturing Tolkien's adaptation of him, right? Or like not adaptation, his actual illustration, excuse me, of him, which is he's definitely just smaller, right? I mean, he's still large, but he's not the same size. But he's big enough that even if he is flying, if he is afraid of the water, the bridge is probably the only place where he can actually land that isn't the roof of a house. Okay. Where, depending on the size of a house, he might either be, I assume that for most of them, he's probably too big to fully land on a house. And so because of that, he actually can't land in Lake Town because it's all docks. It's not. It doesn't easily kind of go together, and that's why later on he seems to be excited about them all getting into boats and going to the mainland. Because if he gets to the mainland, he has no issue taking care of them there. And so I do wonder if some of that is why both Bard, who is he's incredibly wise, he only makes good decisions here in this chapter, says something like "cut that," and then even the narrator tells us he's foiled, like. When he finds he goes towards the bridges, and when he gets there, he's foiled. I wonder if that's a part of it.
Okay. So he can't hover and flamethrower the whole place.
I guess not.
But he does seem excited about them getting into boats because then he can pick them off one at a time.
He can maybe do that on kind of like a pass.
But I think he's able, when he's trying to attack a whole town and they're shooting at him, even though he might not get hurt, it's still a risk, and he would probably rather. He does seem to be somewhat lazy.
Yeah.
So maybe he looks forward to the picking them off one at a time, because if one of them's shooting, he can dodge that and then pick them out.
Yeah, and we have to remember too that Smaug is not motivated by hunger or by conquest. Right now, he is motivated by revenge. He believes that Bilbo and he doesn't know about anyone really but Bilbo and the dwarves who were with Bilbo were sent by the people of Lake Town, which is kind of true. They were equipped by the people of Lake Town, but they weren't sent by them. And so for him, he's almost kind of doing this as a sport. Like, I kind of want to make them suffer, as I assume what's going through his mind. And we see that in what occurs, right? As he sweeps down towards the town, he is destroying things. And actually, we'll find out later on, a quarter of the inhabitants of Lake Town die in what appears to be an actual incredibly quick skirmish here. I don't know how long it really is, but in my head, I kind of wonder, is this just like a 5-minute thing?
Probably.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how it appears.
It's not a giant town.
No, it's not a giant town. And you got to assume that if Bard's running out of arrows, he's probably going through them relatively quickly. I mean, maybe it's more than 5 minutes, but this is not a multi-hour. You would assume the whole town would have been destroyed by then.
Yeah. And
Which I guess
he only has that one arrow.
No, he has more than one arrow.
He only has one really good arrow.
He only has, yeah, that's right. He only has one good arrow. Well, let's not get quite there yet. Tell me a little bit more about the actual destruction and Smaug as he's descending upon this place.
The biggest thing for me is that they are in the water, and then they've also drenched everything with water, and that seems to not really help, unfortunately. The line is, fire leaped from thatched roofs and wooden beam ends as he hurtled down and passed and round again, though all had been drenched with water before he came. But the key here is that they've drenched it, he attacks with flame, and then they soak it again. So I think the real destruction would be if it's allowed to continue burning. He gets it started, but then
is it helping them put out? Because they do. Bard says, we're gonna pretty much any container that holds water, go make sure it holds water. And they do that, but we know that by the time that Smaug is dead, in just a few more paragraphs, the entire town is destroyed. Now, all the people aren't. About 75% of people do survive, at least in the immediate aftermath. We know more people die of sickness afterwards, but the entire town is ruined. It's gone. And so he makes pretty quick work of it. I mean, we're even told that the great house where Thorin and all of them had eaten and met the master is destroyed by really just the flick of his tail. So I just said I guess he's not quite as big as in the movie, but
maybe he is.
Maybe he is, because that's a pretty significant thing to have been done.
Yeah.
And so let me walk this back a little bit, because if he is big enough to have destroyed the great house with his tail, he probably legitimately cannot actually like alight on anything. He's too big.
Yeah.
So really that probably is, and I guess, I mean, I don't know if we were told how big the bridge is. Maybe the bridge is a very large bridge to get there, and that would really be the only place he can get down on.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe it's more of like a really long pier when we're thinking, I was thinking of a drawbridge or, something very, very unable to support his weight.
Yeah. Well, the people they do begin to head into boats. They're all trying to get away. Smaug does not mind this at all. He was looking forward to hunting them for sport if they got to land. But this is where the grim-faced voice begins to actually get a name. And I'll read a paragraph here as the battle continues. But there was still a company of archers that held their ground among the burning houses. Their captain was Bard, grim-voiced and grim-faced, whose friends had accused him of prophesying floods and poisoned fish, though they knew his worth and courage. He was a descendant in long line of Girion, lord of Dale, whose wife and child had escaped down the running river from the ruin long ago. Now he shot with the great yew bow, till all his arrows but one were spent. The flames were near him, his companions were leaving him. He bent his bow for the last time.
So to clarify a reference from earlier, I was talking about the movie where he only has that one giant arrow for his big arrow gun.
In the actual story, it's an actual arrow.
Yeah, and what we're reading here is he has all these arrows and he shoots all of them except for one, and then he has one more remaining.
And that's when let's kind of pause here a minute and talk about this. This is so interesting. That's when the thrush shows up. Did this catch you off guard at all?
No, but I keep being surprised by that thrush. I've read this book multiple times.
You're like, I don't remember this guy at all.
And then this one comes in, I'm like, wow, there really was a thrush all over this book.
Oh, yeah. Pretty important character here.
And it brings him some news, and not a moment too soon.
That's right. So the thrush, which you remember back in On the Doorstep, what was that, chapter 11, I guess, On the Doorstep? We were where the thrush is kind of knocking, and that's how we eventually get in. We're also told that some of the people of Dale were able to communicate with thrushes. I think it was I don't think it's other birds. Well, I guess eagles can talk. I don't know who else can too. Like, can falcons talk, or can ravens? I don't know. But
there's 16 to 25 books that you can look this up in.
But it does. But wait, pause just for a second, because everyone can hear the eagle talk, but only some people hear the thrush talk.
Yeah,
maybe it's more high pitch. It's kind of like a dog whistle. Not every you have to have ears attuned to it.
Well, you have to have a thrush nearby. It sounds like these eagles are big enough to ride. You're gonna probably hear what they have to say.
No, that's true. Okay.
Thrush
got to be close to your ear. It's almost like a hummingbird. It's got to be really close to hear that. Okay. Well, the thrush comes and it says to look for that hollow of the left breast, and
that the moon is rising.
The moon is rising.
And this brought me back to this. This is at night.
Mm-hmm.
And this is also, the only light is coming from the flame of your entire town being set on fire.
Which it does seem like there are lots of those right now.
Yes.
So it's probably pretty bright
There's
outside.
also a lot of smoke. But I think
true.
that if this is a dragon in the distance and then all you have out there is water, you probably wouldn't need the moonlight. So that It really seems like a bunch of factors come together to allow this shot to happen.
Yeah, let's talk about these factors coming together, because this is something where it seems, and Corey Olson points this out in his book, and again, we can't speak highly enough about just what a both fun and informative read along it is. If you're reading the book, or if you're reading the book The Hobbit, it's a great companion to that. And Dr. Olson talks about this being the kind of thing where in many ways there's a culmination of a lot of things here, right? There's the Thrush, who's been a character, finally now meets up with Bard, and part of what the Thrush knows is information that it learned back at the Lonely Mountain for Bilbo and Thorin. And also Bard, this is the culmination of him being the descendant of the Lord of Dale, right? Which is the town that Smaug. Like, all these things are beginning to come together for this one shot. Do you want to go ahead and read what it says? Why don't you start at the dragon swooped once, because that's exactly where all these things come together.
Well, I want to do one paragraph before that because he talks to his arrow.
All right, do one paragraph before that. Tolkien Estate. Phil Wisenhunt is the guy you got to sue, not Daniel Payne.
Oh,
I was going to only read 2 more paragraphs.
You definitely just gave our last names away.
They've been out for a very long time. This is not season 1 of the Lamppost. You can go to the website and it even says where you work. I actually put your social security number on there. Is that okay?
That's fine.
All right.
It's been leaked by the the people who are supposed to protect it.
That's fine.
Multiple times.
All right, go for it.
Arrow, said the bowman. Black arrow.
You think that's... Wait, no, pause. How is he talking to that? Like, what... Where's his... I want that grim voice he's got.
Just replace this with Carl Urban's voice.
Can AI do that?
It can, but please don't actually do that. Arrow, said the bowman. Black arrow, I have saved you to the last. You have never failed me, and always I have recovered you. I had you from my father, and he from of old. If ever you came from the forges of the true king under the mountain, go now, and speed well. The dragon swooped once more lower than ever, and as he turned and dived down, his belly glittered white with sparkling fires of gems in the moon. But not in one place. The great bow twanged. The black arrow sped straight from the string, straight for the hollow by the left breast where the foreleg was flung wide. In it smote and vanished, barb, shaft, and feather, so fierce was its flight. With a shriek that deafened men, felled trees, and split stone, Smaug shot spouting into the air, turned over, and crashed from on high in ruin. Full on the town he fell. His last throws splintered it to sparks and glades. The lake roared in. A vast steam leaped up, white in the sudden dark under the moon. There was a hiss, a gushing whirl, and then silence. And that was the end of Smaug and Esgaroth, but not of Bard.
One word in there before we get to Smaug's actual death here and talk about that.
Was it Glades? Did I say it right?
I thought it might be Gleeds. I wasn't 100% sure either, and I honestly didn't look it up to see how it was pronounced. Do you have any idea where this comes from?
Scotland.
Yeah, so this is an old, archaic word, not really one used remotely regularly anymore. One of those words that Tolkien likes to put into his works that only he, maybe Lewis, like the people who were in the Inklings enjoyed and understand. So this is an old English word that's like a glowing coal. And this word appears a few times in Beowulf, appears a few times in Sir Gawain the Green Knight, a couple other places in some kind of old, into Middle English poetry that you see it. And it's, again, one of those words where anyone else reading this book is going to be like, I don't know what this means. And
the air freshener?
No, it's with a Glede, but yeah. Nice try. But Smaug, yeah, this happens, and these kind of, he falls into the water, and he's dead. As a kid, I love that we read these chapters multiple times in preparation, because something that always bothered me was like, all right, an arrow, this and the size of Smaug, and Arrow's not that significant in size to him. But the narrator is clear to say it goes all the way through. Like, pretty much goes directly into his heart.
Yeah.
To get him, like, oh, there's probably actually pretty small things that if they did go all the way into my heart, that'd be enough, you know? And Smaug falls down into the lake, and I love that, what you just read again. A vast steam leaped up, white in the sudden dark under the moon. And then we hear about the hiss, the gushing whirl, and then silence. There's then a break in the actual text. And then here's what comes next. The waxing moon rose higher and higher, and the wind grew loud and cold. It twisted the white fog into bending pillars and hurrying clouds, and drove it off to the west to scatter in tattered shreds over the marshes before Mirkwood. Then the many boats could be seen dotted dark on the surface of the lake, and down the wind came the voices of the people of Esgaroth, lamenting their lost town and goods and ruined houses. That paragraph continues. I won't read any more of that.
We've definitely hit our limit, but it it does talk about how now they're not in a great spot, but they do have a lot to be grateful for.
A lot to be grateful for. The things could have been a lot worse. But yeah, in whether it was 5 minutes, 15 minutes, however long it was, 25% of a quarter of the people dead, just done, did not escape alive. The town itself is destroyed, but importantly, and we hadn't even talked about this, and I think we might forget about this. Lake Town is not completely a town like secluded on a lake where they never leave the lake, right? We're told that, again, here we go, all their pastures, fields, the woods they use, their cattle, all that is still out there. They just happen to live on the lake, and thankfully those things are still in decent shape. It says that they remained undamaged. And then on top of all these things, there is literally a dead dragon. And the people have not quite thought about what that means, because there's a whole hoard of gold not too far away that is no longer guarded. And right now, it would actually be a pretty good assumption that, well, the dragon probably killed all those other dwarves, right? Like, there's no way if he made it here, that means they're dead. And so for all they know, there's just a completely empty mountain full of gold.
But they're also quite upset with the master of the town.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because then the second half of this chapter is really focused on the master and bard and some of the back and forth between them and the role that the people play here too, because they seem very quick to take one side and then switch to the other side and then take the other side again. And as we said when we first visited Lake Town back in chapter 10, Tolkien has no problem letting us know what he thinks of democracy. Like, are you guys sure this is what you want? You really want the rule of the people? Tolkien really is asking us to consider that.
Yeah, these they don't seem to. They don't even check to see if Bard's actually still alive. They just assume that he's gone. And then in a somewhat epic moment, this tall figure steps from the shadows. He's completely drenched with water, and he has a fierce light in his eyes. And he says that he's still alive and that he is Bard.
And the first shouts are for King Bard, right? And the master, who we kind of skipped over this, but we're told that he tries to leave back when Smaug was still alive attacking. He tries to leave quickly. He puts a bunch of things on his boat, and he tries to escape first, which is obviously in poor taste.
Yeah, it's not great.
And so, and then you have Bard, who has this, and this is really important to Tolkien. He has this, he's a descendant. He has this lineage, right? This important lineage to the Lord of Dale. And it's him who has kind of stood up and been the heroic savior of their town. It is safe to assume that had Bard not killed Smaug, that the rest of the people of the town would all eventually be dead. There wouldn't be any people left to save. And he's done this, right, by kind of merging a bunch of different things, but two very important things. He's merged an arrow from under the mountain, so we kind of the people of Erebor, the Lonely Mountain, but also by being a descendant of the people of Dale. And so he in many ways is kind of bringing these two stories together. He's got a narrative. It sounds like he's a great king, and the people, they recognize that almost immediately. And I think this is really interesting because earlier in this chapter, the people were idiotic. They're like, that's gold just running down from the mountain. That's got to be what it is. And yet here, they are also quick to make assumptions. And yet I get the sense as a reader, I don't know if this is the best way we want to do literary criticism or the way that Tolkien would want us to do it by any means, but I get the sense that Tolkien wants us to root for King Bard, right? And so we're supposed to be like, yes, the people, that's right. Like, I'm especially thinking of when I've read this book with students and the excitement of like, yes, the master was a bad master. He wasn't responsible. He was a coward, and now Bard has saved the day, and we're supposed to get excited for him to come back and finally take over. And so I guess my question to you, and you don't have to have a great answer. I mean, I'm sure you will, but it's okay if you don't.
But no pressure.
And I'd love for listeners is, what does Tolkien want us to think, if anything? Maybe he doesn't care what we think about this or want us to think about this. But if anything, what does Tolkien want us to think about the people of the town and how they are making decisions? They seem to be very easily swayed, overly optimistic in some places, and it's sometimes good, sometimes bad.
This does seem to be a post horrible event clarity of mind for the townspeople. I think they've seen the effects of having someone who just cares about the money side, and then they've seen a true demonstration of
leadership
and courage and real virtue and the benefits of it. They were all toast, and now they're, at least 75% of them are.
Yeah, some of them actually did become toast.
Yeah, but
they're pretty burnt, actually. But yes, right. 75% aren't.
Yeah.
But the master, just as you said, he's here, and
he's really good at.
He's so
shrewd.
He does a great job, and later on in the chapter, the narrator says, like, he didn't get this job for nothing. Like, he has talent, right? And at first he's like, oh, you're right. But, Girion, the Lord of Dale, he was king over, not of Lake Town, but of Dale, obviously. That's what Lord of Dale means. So it sounds like Bard should go back up north. If you guys, like, there's no room for a King Bard here where we always elect our leaders. But maybe you could go back up there to the north. So like he recognizes, again, very shrewdly, he recognizes, okay, the people really like Bard. I can't be like, this guy's bad. This guy's a bad leader. I can't do that. But I could say, yeah, but the bureaucracy doesn't really allow for that here. So you should go over there where you really can't bother me. Mm-hmm. He says to go up there, and yet the people respond with, we want King Bard. They say, what do they say? Up the bowmen, down with money bags, right? is what they shout. And the master, again, he's so good at this. He doesn't go against Bard. He knows that is not the route. That's a losing route.
Right.
Well, who can we blame? We can blame all those people who aren't here to defend themselves.
Right.
That seems like a good group of people to blame.
There's also an interesting contrast between the money was so useful until something happened. That money couldn't necessarily solve. If he had invested that money in maybe more weapons or something, then I could see that potentially helping. But he's really good at stuff until there's a crisis, and then that's when Bard really shone. Mm-hmm. And I think it alerted them to what they actually want. Maybe they can do with a little less commerce and more virtue in this case.
Yeah, and I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but I just really keep coming back to Gumpus in the Lone Islands. I mean, we really had so much fun with that character back in chapters 3 and 4, Voyage of the Dawn Treader. But you have this sense.
It's not normal, by the way.
What?
Being able to recall the exact chapter of.
Oh, chapter 3 is the Lone Islands, and chapter 4 is... Oh, I don't remember the name of that one.
Which episode has Amy Adams in the office? First.
Episode 6, season 1, Hot Girl.
See, that's not normal.
I don't know why it's there. It's not like I want those things to be in my brain. They just end up there somehow. I'm really frustrated. I can't even think of chapter 4 of The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, but that's not what we're here for. I don't want to overfocus on that. But Gumpus, again, part of why he and some of his men are so surprised by Caspian's frustration, especially over like slavery, for instance, is because Gumpus is like, no, but we're making money. Yeah. And no, this is more efficient. Right, and Lewis, he purposefully is less subtle than Tolkien is pretty much saying, hey, all of the things that modernity values are not necessarily the same things that the medieval like world of chivalry is going to value. And it's not that they always don't line up. It's not to say that there are no place for any kind of systems or any kind of bureaucracy. But, I mean, maybe Lewis actually thinks there is. But I don't know if I would go that far. But it is to say that the idea that, we have to be as efficient as possible and we have to make as much money as possible and we can't let ethics get in the way of business is very much something Lewis is having, kind of throwing right in our faces with Gumpus. And yet you see a very similar character here with the Master who's doing a similar thing where Lake Town, I don't know if we'd say it was thriving, but was doing well until a dragon shows up, and it doesn't matter how good your bureaucratic structure is, can't fight a dragon with that.
Yeah.
You need the virtues. You need a courageous hero to do these things. And I think this is such an important thing for children to get to, right? To have someone, I don't know how you felt this way. Maybe I'll back up a second, and this is not a fully formed thought. As someone who's read this book many times, I used to be kind of weirded out by Bard. Not just the grim voice and kind of, he's like a little creepy looking, but I used to be just taken aback by this character who we have literally not met before, being the one who kills the dragon. It frustrated me. Like, no, it should be Bilbo. It's called The Hobbit after all. Like, Bilbo should kill the dragon. Or at least Thorin or Gandalf.
That is pretty different to not have the protagonist be the one to do that.
But this random guy. And the more time I've spent with it, I've really come to enjoy the fact that he can be this kind of archetype especially for our young readers to encounter. An archetype where they look at him and they see him embodying the kind of virtuous things we want to see, but not so much so that he's one-dimensional. Because it does seem like has a tendency to be a little grumpy. He certainly rubs some people the wrong way. And, I mean, he's talking about poisoned fish all the time and all these other prophecies. But he also rises to the occasion and he defeats the dragon. And then after this, honestly, we'll see him a little bit more later through the book, but this is kind of his one shining moment.
Yeah.
I actually kind of love that now as a reader.
It's so different to not have the main character be the one who does all the stuff and to also have this character do something incredible. This is a big moment to take down this dragon. And then there's not a ton of follow-up on him either.
Yeah,
it very much matches Tolkien's way of doing things from what we've read in some of his
Tell me more. What do you mean? Tell me more about that.
I just think that Tolkien is more of he's built this incredibly large world and he's not concerned with having one thread through the whole thing. Mm-hmm. Like even someone like Bilbo who connects so many of the pieces together, he's not the main character of all the things. We have Bilbo as the main character of The Hobbit, but he's somewhat of a side character in The Lord of the Rings. He's in there.
Oh, it certainly is a side character. He's very much a supporting character.
Right.
Yeah, it's funny. Over the years on the show, we've talked about. I think it first came up with Dr. Marcos back in season 4, where we've talked about Lewis and his idea of school stories, and we've talked honestly ad nauseum about kind of the problems with school stories, but that's not going to stop me from doing it again. And I think one of the things we haven't talked about in this idea, and just to remind listeners who may, if you're turning in new just for this season, school stories are these. Lewis doesn't use this terminology. This is the Daniel definition, but they're as opposed to the large scale fantasy stories or even small scale fantasy stories, things like The Hobbit. These are the stories of the boy who works really hard and makes the baseball team and becomes the best baseball player, or the girl who aces her test or whatever. They're stories that take place in school, and they're very relatable to kids. And Lewis says this is actually a big problem. We've talked about that a lot. I think the one kind of narrative twist on that here is that in those school stories, one of the other problems we haven't talked a lot about is the fact that it does begin, because the story is so much focused on this one narrative piece, everything else feels like it's off to the side. Everything else feels, and it's really easy. I mean, the Gen Zers talk about this. They talk about like main character syndrome, right? And it's fun.
And NPCs.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Non-playable characters for our non-nerdy friends out there. Although, if you're listening to this podcast,
our NNFs,
I have some news to share with you. So NPCs, main character syndrome. These are they're funny little things that people say, but they're actually really easy to fall into. They're real traps to fall into, and especially with the entertainment landscape the way it is, social media, it's actually really easy to begin seeing the world as all occurring around you as opposed to you occurring in the world. And these kind of school stories only help like accentuate that in a lot of ways. Whereas a story like The Hobbit, not only does it, you're not going to defeat a dragon. That's okay. That's a good thing. You're not going to do that. So it actually takes you out of our world, but also the way in which Tolkien is writing this story, it feels like it really is, as you were mentioning, a part of a much larger story. Bilbo feels, even in this actual book named after him, he feels insignificant in the larger landscape of Middle-earth. Mm-hmm. And that's actually the way that I want our kids to feel. Not insignificant as in they're made in the image of God and they have infinite value because of that, but there is a much larger world out there, and they are not the most important person in it. And stories like The Hobbit actually help do that. And this is what Lewis was talking about when we read through stuff back in season 8, is these kind of stories help children actually be able to be formed by them in ways that say, no, you're not the most important. And that even happens, I think I love this, that Bard, not Thorin, not Gandalf, not like Bard, who is not a very important character in the story, is the one who actually slays Smaug.
Yeah. It
kind of takes that, if you've been really relating to Bilbo and saying, I love Bilbo, you actually, now you're like, well, I don't want to be like Bilbo, I want to be like Bard. Yeah. It keeps you from doing that. And I don't know that Tolkien is necessarily thinking about that at all, because he's writing this in the 30s, and both he and Lewis is there then critiquing things like school stories. That's happening even a few decades later. And obviously, they're certainly not thinking about NPCs and main character syndrome. Yeah. But I do think it's one of the things that really benefits children as they read this.
It's odd how a fantasy story can be so realistic in that way. Mm-hmm. In that all these things are made up. The dragons are made up. That shot's probably not a realistic shot, especially given the circumstances and the fact that it's at night. But it is realistic in the sense that it takes multiple people working together over time, which is how we've achieved things in this world.
Yeah, it lines up. I think it's on 3 Ways of Writing for Children, where Lewis says, since it is likely that children will meet cruel enemies, let them at least have heard of brave knights and heroic courage. He's like, otherwise, you remember, you're making their destiny darker, not brighter, if you're not careful. And so it's like, these are the things. I remember that's when he's talking about in that essay about, are children going to be afraid of these stories? And he has that great line of like, well, they already believe in monsters. They already know there's monsters in the closet. So you can now teach them that they can be defeated, right? And I think people like characters like Bard almost feel so non-relatable in a way that's good. I think, our modern tendencies think we want all of our characters to always be relatable all the time, right? I remember being in a children's literature class during, I think this was my undergrad degree, and a professor was like, every single book that your kids read should be a mirror to them. Like, pretty much saying like, you don't want it to be kind of the metaphors. Either books can either be mirrors or they can be windows. Windows, in another word, they can be mirrors so you can look back yourself. And obviously, a very postmodern idea is like every book you read should be a mirror to look back to you of your own self-actualization, right? And I wonder if Lewis, had he been in that room, would have been like, no, every single book you read should be a window.
Yeah.
There's actually not much. And I don't know if that's completely true. Obviously, he writes a book like Pilgrim's Regress. He loves Bunyan himself enough to say that there's some good books like that are both windows and they can be mirrors at the same time. I think especially allegories like that. But Bard feels, like a foreign character in a way that reminds us to strive for something better. At least I think about this for young readers. So any final thoughts there before we wrap up maybe the last page or two of this chapter?
I love this transition and foreshadowing of how everyone is now marching toward the mountain.
Yeah, that's right.
And the timing is so well done. There's this big battle with the dragon. The dragon's defeated. There's a conversation amongst the townspeople afterwards. But you can just feel people start to realize what this dragon being defeated actually means.
Yeah, we're told.
The news also spreads, and it's not just local people, it's people from all over are now.
Yeah, even the goblins in the Misty Mountains have heard about it.
Yeah.
Right?
What were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to say, the goblins heard about it. We hear all over it's made its news to Beorn. And the Elven King, actually, and this is really, I love seeing this from him. Thranduil has his men the Elven men going to, that's kind of a weird thing. The elves, I should say, not Elven men, but the elves going to Erebor, and they actually kind of go south down the Long Lake to actually help out the people of Lake Town, which is really great, before then planning to make their way back to the desolate lands, as Tolkien calls them. But you're right, everything is beginning to converge. And then in the back of our head, we know as readers, there's about a dozen dwarves still there in that mountain. We're not quite ready to give up all the treasure that's there.
I'm curious, do they know? How long does it take them to find this out?
We'll have to find out in the next chapter.
Okay.
Which is the great segue, because the next chapter is chapter 15, which is the gathering of the clouds. And Phil, this is a great chapter. In this chapter, Thorin isolates the dwarves in the mountain as the elves and the men all begin to come closer. So this is really when we see quite a heel turn from Thorin.
Yes. And we get to see Bilbo again.
And we get to see Bilbo again. His name appears as the sixth word in the next chapter. So He's back. Well, Phil, before we go, this has been a lot of fun to talk about this with you. I have what might be our short now. We've had even shorter ones, but one of our shorter listener feedback messages. It is from our friend Andrew Trophy.
Hey,
supporter of the show, friend of the show, Andrew Trophy. He wrote into us on Patreon. I'm actually reading a comment on a Patreon post, but I actually thought it was worth a discussion.
Okay.
So you and I, over the last 3 or 4 months, have had multiple episodes where we have been watching the Hobbit movies.
Yes.
We have been doing full-on commentaries. It seems like other people still enjoy them. I would say there are diminishing returns on our part. The last one, it was hard to get through.
It took 2 tries.
But here's an interesting thing. One of the things you and I had been talking about throughout this season, and that Anderson has brought up in the Annotated Hobbit a few times, is that Tolkien at one point tried to rewrite a more serious Hobbit to be more in line with Lord of the Rings. And then he abandoned it because it just doesn't work. And we've talked about that already. Well, here's something interesting. Ander Trophy, after listening to some of our commentaries on the Hobbit movies, said this: I feel like the more serious version Tolkien abandoned would have had a lot in common with these movies.
Interesting.
Now, isn't that interesting?
Yes.
A more serious
What a
Hobbit.
potent comment.
I know. A more serious Hobbit that lines up, more in line with the Lord of the Rings, would actually probably have been what we got there.
Wow. Yeah.
So I think over the years we've done this podcast, one of the most insightful things we have here from Ander thinking about this. I mean, do you think this is this what Tolkien's book looks like?
Yeah.
If he does these things, I mean.
What this brings to mind is the difference between, and keep in mind we're in 2026 right now, so if you're listening to this later it may have changed, but the difference between DC and Marvel up until really kind of the takeover and the new Superman movie that just came out. When Christopher Nolan did the Batman movies, he did them in a very serious, realistic way. It almost feels like this could happen. And then they tried to fit that kind of Batman,
dark vision,
dark realistic vision, together with something like
gritty.
Superman, which is just not quite the same.
I don't need gritty Superman.
Yeah,
I saw Man of Steel once. I'm like, never again.
And Man of Steel is actually one of the better ones. But
that's
the problem
unfortunate.
Is what you run into with the Batman versus Superman movie. It doesn't quite work. Meanwhile, Marvel's cleaning up with the less serious take. And now this has now changed because so many we now have 30 plus movies and people are tired of it. You're hearing terms like superhero fatigue. But when it was first happening, it was much more enjoyable to have this person who's walking around with this gigantic cape cracking jokes, because you're suspending your disbelief, but it all is together. You're not trying to make it super realistic and putting things that don't really fit in that super realistic world together.
And it, when you think about it with The Hobbit, I think one of the biggest issues you and I've had watching these commentaries is that it feels not fun enough. And in the times where it does feel fun, it feels like so much of a shift in atmosphere that it's like, it's jarring in a way. And I think what works for The Hobbit as a book is the fact that it is through and through a children's book. It very much is. It feels that way. Now, anybody of any age can enjoy it, but it reads like children's literature. Maybe it might be a little bit more lost if you're only reading modern children's stuff in the last tip, but it reads like a children's book did in the 1930s, whereas The Lord of the Rings do not remotely read like children's books. And so there is a little bit of that. They don't quite feel the same, and that's actually okay. And yet trying to bridge that gap is, I think, where one of them's going to have to become more like the other, and it just won't work. And we've seen that. And we also saw that in some of those scenes where in the extended version of Desolation of Smaug, Gandalf found, what was it, Thror, I think, or Thrain? He found one of, I forgot at this point from the movie which one, I can't remember if it was Thorin. I guess it was Thorin's father. Yeah, it had to be his father because his grandfather had been killed by Azog. So and there's that thing where then Gandalf meets Sauron, and the necromancer kind of turns into the eye of Sauron. And it's one of those things where it sounds cool on paper because they're mad, they're having these things line up and you get to see all of this and how this plays into that. And it's actually, eventually I don't need all of that. And The Hobbit doesn't really work when Gandalf is fighting a necromancer. In fact, it actually takes away from, wait, if the evil demonic spirit that wants to rule all of Middle-earth is coming back, why do we care about a dragon? Wait a second. And remember, there's even the line in Desolation of Smaug, which is just a wild line where there's Smaug is in league with Sauron. And you're like, what? And they knew that, I'm sure that, again, I love Peter Jackson, love Philippa Boyens, Fran Walsh, who wrote those movies. Obviously, love Lord of the Rings, the movies. But it's almost like they thought, okay, we got to make it clear, because if Gandalf is fighting something that's much more sinister and much more powerful, we have to then make their reason for the movie to be about this much less important thing.
Yeah.
So Sauron and Smaug are in league together.
Right. How does that even work? What are those meetings like?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, any other final thoughts here? I just thought this was fun to chat about. The Anders
it was.
Message there was so cool. I was like, I think that's exactly right.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it is magic to get something as good as The Hobbit, and it's even better to get The Hobbit plus The Lord of the Rings. And I think one of the best things that Tolkien did is he stopped trying to rewrite The Hobbit. And honestly, I think if I were in his position, I'd probably make that same choice to try to make it all fit.
But he was wise enough to be like, nah, it doesn't work.
Yeah. And that to me is the real writing, is leaving the stuff that doesn't work and not sending it out into the world. Because,
and we've talked about some of the extensive rewrites that he did, like especially something in like chapter 5. And the rewrites he's done work.
Yes.
Because he rewrites the parts that need to be rewritten, and then he leaves The Hobbit. And I think in a lot of ways, I love the fact that in this incredible fantasy world that I literally visit on a weekly basis through rereading Lord of the Rings or reading The Hobbit now this season, I like the fact that there's two different kind of atmospheric approaches. The vibes, again, I'm using a lot of the Gen Z slang today. The vibes are different. The Lord of the Rings does not feel the same as The Hobbit, and I'm actually glad they don't. It's ironic that there's so much focus on having the canon all line, and like so much of the world, and we're talking about pop culture here with these Hobbit movies, and we got to make sure that all of it lines up perfectly and it feels exactly the same from here to here. And yet Tolkien, who is arguably the greatest world builder of the entire 20th century, really only has 2 books released in his lifetime, The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, in his world. They both are very different tonally, and yet it's the most realistic. And again, I'm not even talking about the Silmarillion or the other things, but even from just those 2 works alone, it's the most real fantasy world that there is in the 20th century.
Yeah.
And yet the tones are wildly different, and that's okay.
Yeah.
More people could learn from that. Instead of focusing like, we'll make the tone be perfect, but the world's boring. Or
that's how I would do it. If I were a great author, I would only publish 2 books and make them really, really good.
Well,
make them the best.
This is some of my issue with like Robert, and I love Robert Jordan. I like Wheel of Time, but sometimes like tonally they work from place to place and place, but sometimes almost the world is so confusing that I can't even follow through. And like Tolkien, just his stuff works.
Yeah. I was thinking about how I have a trust when I read Tolkien stuff that this isn't just it's not just a facade. It's not pretending that, there's some history here, but I'm not going to go into that until I've made a lot of money, and then I'm going to get some prequels going. This is just, he spent so much time crafting this. Of course, I know I could look it up, and then there'd be all this stuff behind it.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a great place for us to end. This has been a really fun episode, Phil.
It has. Thanks for joining
having
us.
You over to my house. Yeah, you're welcome.
I was thinking the listeners.
Oh, okay. I was like, well, now go ahead and read and then go home. We've talked
Thinly
about
veiled content.
Yeah, you and I don't speak before and after recording the episode. You come in.
We went the entire month of February without seeing each other.
I said that when we recorded Desolation of Smaug. No, it wasn't true. We totally recorded 2 episodes in that month. I just didn't remember it.
It's just like breathing for us at this point. This episode is made possible by our patrons over at patreon.com. If you'd like to support the show, you too can then listen to a bonus episode each month along with other rewards. Here's a special hack. If you really want to save money, you could support us for 1 month and just binge the whole backlog of, are we at 100 plus?
Got to be around 100 episodes, I would assume, at this point. You also can buy certain ones. Have we talked about that before?
Hey, it's in the Patreon story.
Instead of Patreon story, you'd be like, I just want to listen to them talk about the movies, like the Narnia movies, and that, like, you can go buy that one. If you just want to hear the radio dramas, you can go buy just that one. If that might be the only two ones you can buy. There's got to be other ones too, but those are the main ones.
If you want to pirate them, you could just Venmo Daniel at iHeartGreenDay27.
That's not true.
Special thanks goes to John Marr, Emily Wakefield, Ryan Smith, Andrew Trophy, Becca Brown, Christiana Lyon, Ian Wooten, and Hannah Anderson for supporting us at our top tiers.
Yeah, thanks to Hannah, new supporter, our top tier. So
Hey.
thank you, Hannah, for joining this list.
Yeah. Listener feedback can be sent to hello@lamppostlistener.com. Voicemails can be left at 406-646-6733. You can find all of our previous episodes, links, and book information at lamppostlistener.com. The reason I paused earlier is Hannah's been a supporter of the show for a long time.
She has.
This is now an upgrade.
Correct, yeah.
And we're grateful for it. Probably the most stickers sent to one person because she's been such a long-term supporter.
That's right, yeah.
I think she got
Did
all
you
the...
send out the season 10 stickers?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Yeah, they're out.
Is the art sent yet?
No, still working.
I'm just going to keep asking at the end of every episode until it's done.
Yeah, we're going to need to. We're getting close to 2027.
Yeah, you better hurry up.
Got to get on the way, too. There's a looming deadline. I have been working on it this week. I will say that.
Okay.
A review on Apple Podcasts will help other listeners find the show. Thank you for coming along on this journey. And we will be back soon.
All right, we'll see y'all soon.